Good morning to you all, those in the sanctuary of your homes, on Zoom or on YouTube. My name is Norm Horofker, and I'm proud to say that I'm the minister of this congregation, the Universalist Unitarian Church of Halifax, established in 1837. I'm coming to you this morning from my home, where I'm in isolation after a trip to Ontario to see my grandchildren. Don't like the isolation, but it was definitely worth it. Jessica Friesen is our music director. Marie-Claude Leroux is our director of religious exploration, and John Piccolo is our volunteer director and technician. And Vichka Gradstein is our service assistant this morning. In addition, Brian Gifford and Faith Piccolo have parts in the service today. What a great team. Welcome to this, the last service of the month of October. It's a month where we've been exploring the theme of deep listening. During the service today, the chat function will be open, and I invite you to extend your hospitality by saying hello to anyone that you don't recognize or anyone you haven't seen for a while. And if you are returning after a long absence, you may want to leave your contact information in the chat section. If you're not already receiving notifications from our church and you would like to receive updates on our activities and our services, please send an email to me, minister@uuch.ca. Before we proceed, I have a few announcements. The order of service for today was sent out over you info on Saturday, and it contains more detail on these announcements. First, and perhaps most important, our semi-annual general meeting will take place at noon today, following this Sunday service. If you're logged in for the service, just stay logged in and you'll be there for the semi-annual general meeting. As always, there is an announcement about our Thursday night Zoom call, just a social gathering for people who need to break out of a little bit of isolation and have some friendly faces to talk with. It's on Thursday evening, and the details are in the order of service. We have resumed service attendance in the sanctuary. But we ask that if you're planning on coming, that you contact Margaret Galbraith ahead so that she can make appropriate arrangements given COVID restrictions. So now I invite you to relax as Jessica presents the prelude. Beautiful. Each Sunday at this point in our service, we pause to acknowledge that we're on unceded Mi'kmaq territory, the land of Mi'kma'ki. We have to breathe life into these words, that they never become just an empty phrase. What do they mean to us today? This morning, I'm pleased to have Brian Gifford with us. Brian is just back from a trip to the wharf at Saulnier, the center of the dispute over honoring treaty rights that's going on right now. Brian represented our congregation there, and he has some thoughts to share. He's also agreed to join us during our coffee hour to respond to questions. Brian, over to you.
Thank you, Norm. On Friday, I joined 8 people from 5 other faith traditions to travel to Saulnierville. There were Anglicans, United Church members, a Quaker, a Zen Buddhist, and a member of an evangelical denomination. Saulnierville is on St. Mary's Bay between Digby Neck and the mainland on the Acadian shore at the western end of Nova Scotia. We went to Saulnierville to listen and to find out how we could help and to show solidarity with the Mi'kmaq fishers in support of their pursuit of a moderate livelihood fishery without being subjected to violence. We were also aware of the concerns of the non-Indigenous fishers and wanted to express a desire that the issues be resolved peacefully without vilifying them. We were responding to a request from Sibonacady elder Doreen Bernard for people to come. She and a couple of other Mi'kmaq people hosted us at the site. We arrived at the Saulnierville wharf around 1:30 Friday. The first 2 photos show the small Mi'kmaq lobster boats tied up at the wharf. It was a beautiful sunny day. There was no sign of the confrontations that have been in the news. There were no non-Indigenous fishers present. We dropped off some supplies contributed by various people, including firewood, which I stacked below the flag shown in the photo. Doreen said the firewood would be used for their sacred fire. I told Doreen I was there as the Unitarian Universalist and representing the church, and Norm, who sent his regrets. With a smile on her face, Doreen remembered visiting our church and speaking to us and to the children sitting on the mat. After some informal conversation, Doreen led a ceremony for those of us who were visiting. She was assisted by 3 other Mi'kmaq women and a Mi'kmaq man who was sent to the wharf by the Sibonacady band to assess the security situation. The ceremony consisted of several elements, including smudging each of us speaking about why we were there, a berry ceremony, a water ceremony, drumming, and a singing of the honor song. I will tell you some of the highlights of the many things we spoke about. Doreen spoke of their desire to fish in a sustainable way as they have for thousands of years. She spoke of a time during one of the recent confrontations when someone shouted at her to go back where she came from. And she said, "I have come back to where I came from. My great-grandfather lived in the Pubnico area." Sorry, I'm having trouble with this. Lived in the Pubnico area, and he and his family were removed and taken to Shubenacadie in the centralization policy of the 1940s. She spoke of another time during a tense confrontation with non-Indigenous fishers when she smudged everyone, including, sorry, I didn't think this would happen, but including the people who were angry at them, some of them drunk and dangerous. She asked everyone to calm down. In these ways, she protected herself and her people, as well as the people in opposition to them, by bringing a spirit of peace between them. There was no harm done at that time, but it was very scary and tense, she said. In a Zoom presentation Thursday night, evening before we traveled to Saulnierville, someone asked Doreen what she thought a moderate livelihood fishery meant. She said she thought it meant Mi'kmaq fishers earning as much as non-Mi'kmaq fishers so they can live a decent life. Most Mi'kmaq people still live in poverty. This definition of a moderate fishery is more robust than any I have heard before, but I think it makes sense, even if it makes coming to a resolution on the moderate fishery definition that much harder. Why should Mi'kmaq fishers make anything less than the standard livelihood from fishing? Doreen says education is important. The Royal Commission on Aboriginal Peoples, the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, these all have shown us the roadmap for reconciliation. We're fighting for full sovereignty, she says. Norm attended the Thursday evening Zoom call as well and asked Doreen if the core issue was that they want to be dealt with on a nation-to-nation basis and not be dictated to by DFO or Indian Affairs. She replied, yes, that is the key for them, but their band does not support the Nova Scotia Assembly of Chiefs and their Mi'kmaq Rights Initiative as the Mi'kmaq organization that should do the negotiations for Sibonectady. This is a complicated issue. On Thursday, Doreen also said the most pressing thing now is dealing with the hostility and trauma that has occurred over the last month. They were very anxious Thursday because a temporary injunction had been approved to end blockades, interference, and threats. They were asked to remove their own barriers, and they weren't sure if the RCMP would follow the injunction and if it would keep them safe. On Thursday, Doreen said they are always on alert, on guard for potential aggression after all they've been through. But she said on Friday when we were there that they were feeling more secure than the day before because there were no aggressive incidents. She said our being there lifted their spirits as well. These are the highlights of what was said. I believe this is another important turning point in the relationship between the Mi'kmaq and those of us who have settled here more recently in Nova Scotia. I personally know of one of the non-Indigenous fishers leaders, not well, but as an acquaintance, and I believe he has been stating their concerns very well. He condemns the violence, but is asking for a voice at the negotiations. I believe it is important that we be present and provide support to the Mi'kmaq fishers in ways that they invite us to. They must not be subjected to ongoing violence and intimidation. There must be a way to work this out, and we need to stand with them through the coming days and weeks. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. With people like you in the congregation representing us, our acknowledgement of Indigenous territory will never become hollow. Thank you so much. The inspiration for this morning's chalice lighting words come from a reflection on the spiritual connection that the Mi'kmaq people maintain with their ancestors and with the natural world. In our hectic modern life, we lose that sense of connection. We listen to 24-hour news channels. We listen to the chatter of social media. We listen to the noise, hoping that we will discern something important in the cacophony. The poem by Birago Diop tells us to turn off the chatter and listen to the spirit of our ancestors as present in nature. Light the chalice with these words. Those who have died have never left. The dead have a pact with the living. They're in the woman's breast. They're in the wailing child. They're with us in our homes. They're with us in this crowd. The dead have a pact with the living. So listen more often to things than to beings. Is the ancestor's breath when the fire's voice is heard. Later today, in our semi-annual general meeting, we'll be discussing plans and budgets for the year 2021. The budget reflects the mission of our congregation, and this year we have high hopes for our future. Once the budget is established, we'll start our annual every member canvass. That's how we fund the work of our congregation. And in preparation for that, we seek members of the congregation to speak briefly about what this congregation means and has meant to them and why they support the congregation. This morning, Faith Piccolo has agreed to share her thoughts. Faith?
Good morning. I've been a member of the Unitarian Church of Halifax for about 12 years now. I knew very little about UUs before coming here, The only Unitarian I knew of was Lada Hitchmanova. And those of us of a certain vintage will remember the little red-haired woman in the TV ads wearing a military-style outfit, asking us to help feed starving children. I actually met Lada back in the 70s when I worked for CBC Radio. We were interviewing her one morning, and I picked her up at her hotel. What a surprise. She was shorter than I was, but I digress. I grew up Catholic, went to an all-girls school taught mostly by nuns, went to Mass every Sunday. But as an adult, the Catholic Church wasn't relevant to my life anymore. And in all good conscience, I didn't want to belong to a church that would never accept women as ministers. And I wanted my gay friends to be more than just tolerated. You tolerate an irritant, but you never embrace it. I was encouraged to check out this church by two members, Ella Wilson and Etta Ham. I met them one weekend when the church was having an auction. They assured me this was the church for me. My first UU service was a real eye-opener. There was no reciting of prayers, no kneeling, no statues, no minister resplendent in satin brocade robes. No, it had none of that. The congregation was small, but what it did have was involvement by its members. Input on everything from whether we should be called a church at all, to how to get a green burial, to a report on someone who was sick and could use some cheering up. I found a church that embraced diversity, straight, trans, white, black, and all the colors in between. And not just by talking about it, but by publicly protesting, marching in parades, and raising money to bring refugee families to Halifax. At the UU Church of Halifax, I found a minister who took outreach to a whole new level with his neighborhood brunch program. He not only feeds the hungry, but he knows all their names and their stories. So whether you call yourself a church or not, I'm proud to be a member. Thank you.
Thank you, Faith. Thank you so much, Faith. And now Jessica will lead us in the opening hymn based on the poem Breaths by Barago Diop.
So everyone in the congregation, I would like you to sing along. This might be a new song, but it's wonderful.
Thank you. And now a time for children of all ages, led by our Director of Religious Exploration, Marie-Claude Leroux.
Good morning, everyone. Today I'll be sharing a story of healing. Healing that begins when a young girl listens with her heart and her mind. Under the Lemon Moon by Edith Hope Fine. Deep in the night, Rosalinda heard noises. What is that? She wondered, slipping from her bed. She peeked out past the garden. Way back by the lemon tree, something was moving. Heart thumping, Rosalinda crept to the doorway. Bianca, her pet hen, fluttered down from the rafters. A man with hunched shoulders was stuffing lemons into a cloth sack. Her lemons, from her tree. In the morning, Rosalinda touched the stump of a broken branch. Not a single lemon was left on the whole tree. A tear slid down her cheek. Oh, my little tree. Rosalinda loved her lemon tree almost as much as she loved Bianca. Why, Bianca? Why did he do this? She asked, clutching a bundle of twigs. Bianca's feathers drooped. By the end of the week, many leaves of the lemon tree were yellow. Some had fallen. Rosalinda's worries got bigger. First the nightman, now her tree was sick. Seeking help and advice, her neighbor suggested she talk to her tree. I did that, thought Rosalinda. Her parents suggested she water it. I did that too, thought Rosalinda. Her abuela suggested she light a candle. I haven't done that, thought Rosalinda. It will take time for your tree to heal, mija, abuela said quietly. The candle will help. Perhaps it will summon la anciana, the old one. She helps things grow. Everyone had heard rumors of la anciana, of her powers for bringing rain and making crops grow strong and tall. Where can I find her? Asked Rosalinda. No one knows, but they say she will come when she is needed. Rosalinda thought hard. I need you. Please come, anciana. All day and night, Rosalinda waited, but la anciana did not come. The next day, Rosalinda and Bianca walked and walked searching. Everywhere they went, she called, Anciana, anciana. La anciana did not answer. Maybe she isn't real, Rosalinda said to Bianca. Circling back through the mercado with its colorful stalls and busy shoppers, Rosalinda stopped. Lemons, said a sign on the last stall. Behind a man, a woman rocked a baby. Their two small children played nearby with pebbles. Rosalinda knew this man with the hunched shoulders who was selling lemons. He was the nightman, and the lemons were hers. Rosalinda shivered. Where are you, anciana? I am here, came a low, sweet voice. Rosalinda jumped. Before her stood a woman with silvery hair. Her wrinkles were deep, her eyes gentle. You've looked for me, Rosalinda. Tell me. The woman listened as Rosalinda whispered her story. To take your lemons was wrong, la anciana murmured. Perhaps he had a need. From her flowing sleeve, she pulled a strong branch with tiny buds. The moon will be full tonight. Rosalinda listened with her heart and mind as la anciana spoke of how to heal the lemon tree. That night, Rosalinda crept outside under the lemon moon. She bound la anciana's branch against the stump of the broken branch of her lemon tree. Moonbeams poured over the sickly tree, making yellowed leaves look silver. Tired, she curled up under her tree and dozed. She woke with a start when Bianca squawked. Rosalinda rubbed her eyes, astonished. Her tree glowed golden in the night, dripping with lemons as big and round as baby moons. The next morning, Rosalinda knew what to do. She piled fat yellow lemons into a wooden cart and off they went. Friends and neighbors greeted her. One by one, Rosalinda gave away the amazing lemons. She was headed for the last stall of the mercado. Rosalinda stared at the night man, and he stared back. Then her warm hand touched his cold, rough hand, and she gave him her last fat lemon. "I am sorry," the man said, lowering his eyes. "Plant the seeds," she told him. "Do it tonight while the moon is still full." The man was quiet. He looked toward his family with their worn clothes and hungry faces. "I will do as you tell me," he said. Rosalinda smiled. Except for one fat hen, her cart was empty. But her heart was as full as a lemon moon.
Thank you, Marie-Claude. We take this special time now to reflect on our joys and sorrows. It's a sacred time in our service. It's a time that we set apart to honor the many sorrows and the many joys that you, the congregation, are living, and to acknowledge the mutual support of our community. Today, I'll ask Jessica to light one candle for all those who are here with us or in our thoughts, who are struggling mentally, physically, financially, or emotionally. Jessica will also light one candle for all the joys that are here in the sanctuary, in our homes. The big joys come along only infrequently. The little joys we are blessed with by every day, if we're able to see them. And I'd like to light a candle once again for the members and friends of our congregation who are shut in long-term home care. Things are improving, but it is still a difficult place to be. A candle for John Patterson and Marie Davis and Irisha Cox and Ann Wood, Norm Sabowitz and Dr. Philip Welch. Each week I invite anyone with a joy or a sorrow to share at this time to relay their thoughts to me by email. This morning I have this note from Mary Ellen Ono. She wrote, "I lost my oldest school friend suddenly and unexpectedly last Monday. Her name is Cynthia Taylor. We grew up together in Montreal West. I was her bridesmaid and she was mine. I'm grateful that she and her husband Bill visited us in September and we had dinner together and shared old memories." That note with appreciation. Peter and I are doing okay. And this morning when I turned on my computer, there was a note there. 48 years ago yesterday, the Halifax UU Church members formally recognized the beginning of a long and loving and beautiful relationship with the LGBT community. October 24th, 1972, the Board of Directors motioned that the Gay Alliance for Equality can use the space for lectures, discussions, etc. by a gay social group. That the group be permitted to use the building without payment Wednesday nights, carried 5-2. Reverend Fred Gillis will discuss this in his sermon next Sunday. Thanks, Doug, for doing the research on this. And as noted, we should plan a big celebration for 2 years from now, when it'll be the 50th anniversary. Later, when we stop the live streaming on YouTube and before the coffee hour begins, I'll invite anyone else to share a joy or a sorrow if they would like to do so. And now, Jessica will lead us in the reflective hymn that speaks to us of deep listening.
So this is a song that I know most of you know. So now that I can hear you in the congregation, let's make sure they can hear us at home. Find a stillness, hold a stillness, let the stillness carry me. Find a silence, hold a silence, let the silence carry me. In the Spirit, by the Spirit, with the Spirit giving power, I will find true harmony. Seek the essence. Seek the essence, hold the essence, let the essence carry me. Let me flower, help me flower, watch me flower, carry me. In the Spirit, by the Spirit, with the Spirit, give me power, I will find true harmony. Let's sing I will find true harmony again. I will find true harmony.
So nice to hear voices in the sanctuary. May the joys and the sorrows, both those acknowledged here this morning and those held in the silent sanctuary of our hearts, weave us together in the interdependent fabric of beloved community. I now would like to invite Wietske Gradstein to present a reading that speaks to us of listening.
Listen, can you hear it? The Spirit is calling. It calls us in the silence and through the noise and busyness of our daily lives. It calls us in the brightness of the day and the darkness of the night. In times of hope and despair. Listen, can you hear it? The Spirit is calling. It doesn't matter what you call it. It has no name. It has many different names. The Spirit of life, the Spirit of love, the Spirit of compassion, the Spirit of hope, the Spirit of justice. Listen, can you hear it? The Spirit is calling. It is calling to you and to me. It is calling to greater wholeness, greater connection, greater service, greater love. It is calling us to heal the brokenness within ourselves, in others, and in the world. It's calling us to live more deeply. It is calling us to beauty. It's calling us to laugh and dance and sing. It's calling us to live through life's pain and sorrow. It is calling us to live courageously and kindly, to speak our truth in love, and to bend the moral arc of the universe towards justice. It is calling us into community. It is calling us into the greater life of all. Listen, can you hear it? The Spirit is calling.
Thank you, Wietske. So in today's service, we're wrapping up a month devoted to the theme of deep listening. I've explored the importance of listening to the indigenous people of this land. We've explored the vulnerability that comes with really listening, that risks a broken heart. And today I've titled my reflection, Listening to God. Do I need to tell you that I don't know any more about God than you do? That my conclusions are no more valid than yours, which may be diametrically opposed to mine? The point is that we come to church not to hear the absolute truth from the minister, but to engage in dialogue about truth and to grow individually and spiritually in the process. This morning, I'm addressing a question. If there is a God, or a spirit of life, or a spirit of compassion, or whatever name you want to give that higher power, how can that work in the world? How do we square that with what we know of science? The story that Marie-Claude told us this morning sets the stage for the discussion. In Under the Lemon Moon, the spirit moves in two ways. There's a classical miracle whereby that lemon tree recovers miraculously overnight, yielding bountiful, large, sweet lemons. But there's a much more subtle miracle. We're told that the next morning, Rosalinda knew what to do. She would give one of the lemons to the man who had stolen her lemons and destroyed her lemon tree. That's the only kind of miracle that I've ever witnessed. How does that miracle happen? The miracle of love and forgiveness, the willingness to extend oneself for the benefit of another human being. My reflection this morning draws on my life's journey. I grew up basically unchurched. I've been fascinated by science since childhood, and most of my life I've questioned the existence of a God. I didn't see it as really particularly relevant to my life. But as I grew older, and the more that I understood about science, the more I thought about the amazing universe that we inhabit. The more I realized that there are deep, fundamental questions that science seems unable to answer. I'm certainly not alone in this, but I seem to belong to a minority group, a group that is obsessed with asking those deepest, unanswerable questions, the questions that science leaves open for us. In the last year, I've discovered an amazing resource for people like me. Others watching today may be very familiar with this, but I don't know how I missed this. It's a US-based public television series called Closer to Truth. This from a Wikipedia article about it. The show is centered on-camera conversations with leading scientists, philosophers, theologians, and scholars, covering a diverse range of topics or questions, from the cause, size, and nature of the universe, to the mystery of consciousness and the notion of free will, to the existence and the essence of God, to the mystery of existence. Why is there anything at all? This website, Closer to Truth, has the world's largest archive of video interviews with leading experts on the philosophy of cosmology and physics, consciousness, and the philosophy of religion. It's the brainchild of Robert Lawrence Kuhn, the creator, executive producer, writer, and presenter of the series. Robert Kuhn is a religious skeptic. He has a PhD in neurology. He's an investment banker. He's a renowned scholar on modern China. And he is obsessed with these big questions. If you're at all interested in the interface between modern science and modern religious thought, I highly recommend this resource. Just Google Closer to Truth. While thinking about deep listening, I stumbled on an interview on that site between Robert Kuhn and Philip Clayton, a well-known professor of theology. They were discussing this big question. If there is a God who intervenes in the physical universe, how does God do that without violating the laws of physics? That's a very profound question. When I was in seminary, one of my courses went into this topic in great detail. I guess you have to be kind of a nerd to find this stuff exciting. But last night, I'm gonna get this. I took out and dusted off my notes from one course that I had taken. That course dealt, among other things, with this question. Trying to understand how a God that operates within the laws of physics could affect the way the world operates. The premise underlying the discussion that I'm going to show you in a minute is that human consciousness and human thought is mysterious. And at this point, at least, it's beyond scientific explanation. Thought and consciousness appear to be non-mechanistic. They can't be explained as a cause and effect process. The fact that I can influence your behavior by influencing your thoughts is obvious. But nonetheless, the process by which this happens is beyond scientific explanation. Philip Clayton is proposing that if I can influence your thoughts by some process, then it's presently unexplainable by science, then there is a mechanism by which God could also intervene in the universe. Such a God wouldn't work miracles in the common sense, walking on water or curing the sick or healing lemon trees. Those would violate the laws of physics. But God could change the course of history by influencing our thoughts. That small, quiet voice that we hear if we listen. So now I'm going to try to share a short section of that video interview. Hoping this works.
Philip, I have a passionate desire to know whether God exists, but as soon as I ask that question, I say, okay, does that God intervene in the world the way a lot of theologies tell me he does? As soon as I ask that question, I'm saying, how does God interact with the world if he does intervene, if there is a God? So I got to get to those questions. How do I begin to address that question? How can God interact with a physical world?
It's a deep dilemma, because if you have a God that can't do anything, you have deism. You know, the creator God who, as Pascal said, snapped his fingers and left the stage. If you have a God who intervenes, then aren't you setting aside the laws of natural science? Haven't you made science impossible and set up a fundamental tension between science and theology? I think that's the sort of issue that theology most needs to wrestle with. No theist today in an age of science can put forward that position without having some answer to that quest.
Okay, so how do we begin to make progress?
I think we have to rule out some positions that are non-starters. So the God who just steps in with physical miracles right in the midst of this macro-physical world, that shuts down the possibility of science. That's not a God that I can affirm, though I admit that probably the majority of American Christians hold that view.
Well, that, of course, doesn't make it right, but I would say a large number of eminent theologians would have that view, and the view is that although the vast majority of the time there's regularity in the physical world, that God's laws just that he created occur, that God can intervene in those laws from time to kind of jiggle them a bit.
Yeah. I suppose I would see two areas that we could look that might make some progress. We know under a certain interpretation of quantum physics, the so-called Copenhagen interpretation, that there is uncertainty, indeterminacy at the level of the quantum superposition, and then a determinate state. And that transition is not a matter of natural law. So it might be that God intervened in that gap between the Schrödinger wave equation and the discrete states after the measurement.
That it's not a matter of law. I think it's in quantum physicists would say that there's a natural process. It may be unpredictable, any one given thing, but statistically, path integrals, all sorts of things, is quite deterministic.
Precisely. So if God is doing anything at that level, and I'm skeptical, then God has to observe the probabilities. So at the end of however many millions of interventions, the probability distribution is unaffected. This is a very, complex God, having to fit everything out so the math always works out right in the end. But it is at least possible. No natural law would be broken if God intervened at that level.
Okay, all right. So that's one possibility.
Yeah.
Skeptical?
The reason I'm so skeptical is it seems like a category mistake. Here you are down at the level of the mathematics of this fundamental reality in an area where we can do good empirical work. And suddenly you're saying, oh, there's an intentional agent who's underlying the probability distributions and sort of propping them up on his shoulders to make them work out right. If that's not a tinkering God, I don't know what is.
Okay, so you're saying that if you use that technique to get God sort of non-interventionally intervention in the process, it's sort of contradiction.
Right. It also is dependent on one particular interpretation of quantum physics, the Copenhagen interpretation.
Right.
I actually think that the better developments recently are decoherence theories, which are much more metaphysically parsimonious. They don't import as much stuff.
But either way, without dealing with what the true quantum theory is, which I don't think anybody really knows, but in order to try to, kind of shoehorn God into this, you reject it either way, no matter what your interpretation. That's not where it's going to happen.
Right. So
but you need God to intervene if you believe in some sort of
That's
a
right.
theistic position.
Right. So for me, it all turns on the human person. And I can put it in very clear terms. Either we are ultimately the product of natural law, or we aren't. If human thought ultimately manifests some sort of natural law, then there's no place for divine action, because God would have to set aside those natural laws, which would make God doing physical miracles in exactly the same way as in the traditional view. But if it turns out that human thought is not the product of natural laws, but involves a non-law-like creativity, a pattern which is the result of human thought and intention, then for there to be a divine interaction would be no more breaking natural law than when you change my mind by your next comment.
I don't know if I'll do that. But it seems like you're driving an artificial distinction between the natural law that works in the physical world and the laws that produce the mental states that we have. Is that what you're doing? You're saying there's no laws? You're not saying that. It's not a random thing that our mentality is. It's based upon principles or laws. How are you differentiating here?
As an emergence theorist, I believe that over the course of evolution, you have systems arising with greater and greater levels of spontaneity. That the sort of constraints on the behavior of a flatworm, right, are less than the constraints on the behavior of an electron or a chemical solution. The constraints on the behavior of a dog engaged in play behaviors are less. And it seems to me that by the time you reach conscious thought, this is our own introspective awareness as well. By that point, we are able to make a decision and carry out actions.
Okay, so what you're saying is that by building in an emergent understanding of how the world works, particularly about our consciousness, that enables you to enable God, as it were, to come in and to interact and intervene, because that kind of God would be intervening in something that is an emergent property as opposed to a law-like property.
Yeah, I can put it in really simple terms. If we can interact and influence each other through our words and ideas, that you can lure me toward a position or cause me to turn away from a position, and that doesn't break any physical law, then thought to thought activity, that is reasoning between human beings, personal influence, is a natural phenomenon. If that's true, it would be possible to imagine a type of rational being who had our sorts of abilities and, say, infinitely more, to be one of the factors that influences our thought.
And is it fair to even ask the question, how would that being do this?
Only if it's fair to say that we can explain our behavior, our mental behavior in terms of brain mechanisms. If that's false, if you can't give a mechanistic account of thought, it presupposes the brain working but is never reduced to the brain working, then it's possible to say, though I can't explain the mechanisms, that there's a divine influence or lure on human thought, which doesn't break natural law. Can I prove it? No. Can I assert it consistent with science? Yes.
Okay, I don't know how much you enjoyed that, or do you have to be a nerd like me to enjoy that kind of a discussion? Doesn't Philip Clayton look like someone you could enjoy learning from? Or is that just me? The point of all of this is that I don't believe in a God that intervenes in the world by manipulating matter and energy in ways that would violate the laws of physics. And yet I see the experience in the world that speaks to me of something behind it all, something good that calls me to become my better self. The explanation given by Philip Clayton intrigues me. It allows me to hold a belief in God and how God works in the world that is consistent with science. It allows me to put flesh on what I experience, that this is an amazing world beyond my comprehension, and that I do hear a voice guiding me in a direction and encouraging me towards love and compassion. And it assumes that the most important thing that I can do is to listen to that still small voice that calls me towards becoming my better self. That isn't the answer to all the big questions in life, but it's an interesting possibility with profound implications. The idea of listening to that inner voice is expressed in many ways in many religious traditions. It's the idea that we need to know is present within us, that what we need to know is present within us if we're just still and are able to listen. As we end the month devoted to deep listening, I suggest that we all listen less to the noises around us, spend more time listening to that inner voice that urges us to love and to treat one another with compassion. May it be so. And now, the after choir have selected the perfect piece of music for this morning's service. Over to Jessica, Jim, and James, the after choir.
So what James was saying before is that we are doing a piece by Susan Werner, and she writes pieces from an agnostic point of view.
She did one album, which was her gospel album, which was from an agnostic point of view. She has a wide range of themes and things that she does when she plays with her albums. But this one's called Did Trouble Me, which is sort of that sense of conscience. And where is that coming from? What does it mean?
And from you at home, James just said it's called From Did Trouble Me. And I forget the rest. So here we go.
When I closed my eyes so I would not see, my Lord did trouble me. When I let things stand that should not be, my Lord did trouble me. When I held my head too high, too proud, my Lord did trouble me. And when I raised my voice too little, too loud, my Lord did trouble me. Did trouble me with the word of sign, with the ringing of a bell in the back of my mind. Did trouble me, did stir my soul, for to make me human, to make me whole. When I slept too long and slept too deep, my Lord did trouble me. Put a worrisome vision into my sleep, my Lord did trouble me. When I held myself away and apart, my Lord did trouble me. And the tears of my brother did move my heart, my Lord did trouble me. Did trouble me with a word or sign, with the ringing of a bell in the back of my mind. Did trouble me, did stir my soul,
Thank you, Jim, James, and Jessica. And now this time in our service is when in pre-COVID times we would pass a collection plate. Instead, this morning I have a message from the board of the church. The UU community, UUCH community has been so loving and generous during this strange and unsettling year. Many thanks to all those who have kept the financial house in good order. Your giving is so appreciated. We have continued to pay staff, offer our Saturday bag brunch, stock the food bank, and thanks to your generosity. Going forward, we know that we can continue to count on you. If you'd like to make a donation at this time, you can do so by e-transfer to treasurer@uuch.ca. If you prefer to do it by check, you can always send a check to the church address. This with gratitude from your board of directors. Now, our closing hymn from Jessica.
There's a river flowing in my soul. I know all of you know this. And if you don't, it's easy to sing along. There we go. Everyone, there's a river flowing in my soul. There's a river flowing in my soul. And it's telling me that I'm somebody. There's a river flowing in my soul. You know all the words here. You can look here. Ready? There's a river in my heart flowing in my heart. There's a river flowing in my heart. And it's telling me that I'm somebody. There's a river flowing in my heart. One more. There's a river flowing in my mind. There's a river flowing in my mind. And it's telling me that I'm somebody good. There's a river flowing in my mind. There's a river flowing in my, let me hear you, mind. I love the energy.
Thank you. I'm not the only one watching today wishing that I could be in the sanctuary, I'm sure. And now, before Jessica extinguishes the chalice in the sanctuary, these closing words. Do you hear it? That voice, so familiar yet still far off? Less a longing and more a knowing. A whisper of something inside that seems to have known us longer than we have known it. Now and in the week ahead, may we pause and listen. Thanks to everyone who tuned in to the service today, who came out to the sanctuary in person, and to all of those who helped make the service possible this morning. Whether you're watching by Zoom or YouTube. To those who are watching by YouTube now, I'll say goodbye. And as we end our live streaming, thanks again and go in peace.